where do you think this like distinction like comes? Like, do you think that there will be some sort of like split now where there is like a new party or like a new faction of like classical liberals like spring up or someone like yourselves, or say like the Libertarian Party or something, or Lawrence Fox's I think it's Reclaim.
Reclaim, yes.
Yeah. Like, do you think that one of these parties is going to get traction? Because it seems to me that both of our major parties right now are kind of selling out their values. Like the Conservatives are the ones implementing like this really hard, you know, yeah, clamp down on our personal freedoms, like a thing that I could never have imagined people like Jacob Rees-Mogg or Steve Baker or any of the ERG going along with. And then at the same time, you've got Keir Starmer just like doing his very utmost to ignore every single promise he made about how he was going to run the Labour Party when he was running to be its leader. Like like saying we're not going to raise corporation tax, and then Rishi Sunak comes along and goes, "Ha, we've got you here," and decides to raise corporation tax. I feel like both are betraying their bases, and normally what would happen then is you'd see something else spring up. But I'm not convinced, or I don't see exactly who that might be. Like what do you think?
Well, I think I'm going to apologise in advance because this could be a long answer. At the end of it, I may not even have an answer for you because it's a difficult one. But let's go through all those sort of elements. For starters, we've got the first past the post system, and both main parties are committed to first past the post, so nothing is going to change. And whilst we've got that, it's ultimately going to mean that either Labour or the Conservatives are going to form a government. It could be a coalition government, but you're either going to have a Labour Prime Minister or you're going to have a Conservative Prime Minister. So all these new parties that are coming out are just going to crash and burn, as they always have done. The only exception to that, of course, was UKIP, and UKIP could do that through the European Parliament and get plenty of people elected, and that's where UKIP's successful. But we don't have that anymore. So it's going to be difficult for these new parties. So what you end up doing is you end up aligning with a party. I align with the Conservative Party because, in general, most of its principles are what and views I agree with, although there's lots that I completely disagree with. Therefore, we try and push more classically liberal views along because we don't have much of a chance with the Labour Party. There are some actually in the Labour Party, and I do know them, but they're very, very much in the minority. So it tends to be the Conservative Party that you would work with more. And you try to nudge them in that particular direction. I mean, that's what pressure groups do. The one rule in politics is that you can't go from A to B like that and change it. There are lots of different stages along, and you just try to nudge it in that particular direction. So that's where we are there. As for the main parties, well, I remember doing a podcast about a year ago, I would think. It was just before Keir Starmer was announced as leader of the Labour Party. And I was doing it with a Labour Party member. And I said, if the Labour Party elects basically a London metropolitan type leader, it will be the biggest mistake because they will not really have any traction with what was traditionally the sort of working class base in the Midlands and the north of England. And it's proving true. I mean, Keir Starmer doesn't really have any cut through at all. People in parts of the north and the Midlands tend to be very socially conservative people. And there are also people who know their own minds and want to make their own decisions. And yet you'll hear sort of Starmer maybe talk about transgender issues or the focus on all these top things that are on the periphery. I'm not saying that these issues shouldn't be discussed and debated, because of course they should. But when you're enduring all these restrictions and people are losing their jobs and perhaps may lose their homes and things like that, they want to hear about those issues first and foremost, and the rest can take a back seat until those issues are addressed. So I think Labour is completely failing its traditional voters, without a doubt. As for the Conservative Party, well, yeah, I agree with you. Who would have thought? I mean, why did Rishi Sunak announce that in 2 years' time we're going to increase corporation tax, and then try to pretend, when we're still going to be the lowest in the G7 and all the rest of it, or the Republic of Ireland at what, 12.5%? I know if I was an international business, I was looking to relocate, and I was looking at the rates of corporation tax, then I'd be thinking about relocating to somewhere near Dublin, maybe rather than somewhere near London. And also, it's just, how do I phrase this? Boris Johnson, in particular, has fallen into the trap of trying to argue using the Labour Party and the left's turf. I'm explaining this very badly, but he's basically not saying, well, we're different. He's trying to say, oh, well, if we move a little bit further to the left, and we try to park our tanks on Labour's lawn, then we maybe mop up some votes like that. He tries to pretend that he's a libertarian, but I see precious little evidence of that. And I see precious little evidence of him personally really being much of a conservative. What is Johnsonism? I don't know. I don't think he knows from one day to the next. So I do think that both parties are failing their bases. But will that change? Probably not, because the voting system isn't going to change. And we just have to keep putting pressure on the parties to change. And that always takes a long time. And then you tend to push them in that particular direction. And then guess what happens? A new leadership comes along and they push you back. And then you've got to start all over again. That has happened quite a lot over the years.
Yeah, the one thing I do want to say actually about the corporation tax thing is, like, I think that the rate of corporation tax is essentially meaningless whilst we have so many tax loopholes. Like, if we left corporation tax where it is and just closed all tax havens, or made it very difficult to do it, hired some more people for HMRC, then we wouldn't have to worry about corporation tax, because we would get more tax revenue based on, the people who aren't paying their fair share at the minute, instead of punishing the people who are now obeying the rules.
The fair share, though, Josh, you said that. Many people have said this to me. Richer people, corporations should be paying their fair share of tax. I ask them what that fair share is, and no one can actually sort of say what it is.
Okay, that's a fair point. But I still feel that, like, the rate that we have now, right, is the one that we as a democratic body or country have agreed that that's what we want it to be right now, vaguely. Okay, I know obviously it's not directly how it happens, but so we have elected a government who has made that the rate, and no one has protested to the point where that government has fallen apart. So that's the rate that, like, our democracy has decided should be the rate paid. So I'm not a huge fan of anyone then using the web of offshore, incorporated territories and tax havens and whatnot to avoid paying tax that, say, a small business would have to pay. I don't believe that you should, that the difference should be based on how good your accountant is. I think it should, you could make the case and say, okay, we can close all of these loopholes, but then make sure that people pay an even lower rate of tax. And I would be much happier to see that than have the discrepancy based on, like I said, how good your accountant is.
Well, it's not so much how good your accountant is, how good your lawyer is. Because it boils down to that. And of course, small businesses can't employ these sort of people. They end up just having to pay. I totally agree. But also, I'm reminded of what I would regard as a truth. Some people may not, but I regard it as a truth, is that businesses cannot pay tax. Only people can pay tax. The more tax a corporation pays, for example, the smaller the dividend it will be to investors. It may mean that it doesn't have as much money to invest, which will then create jobs. It means that wages may be lower as a result of it. I hate crony capitalism. I really do. This sort of corporatism. It's vile, and it's not what I believe in. And I think there are some of us on the right of British politics who really should be shouting about that a lot more. because it's simply not fair. Nor do I want to see workers exploited. I do believe, that highly skilled workforce should be paid a decent wage. But nor do I believe in minimum wages, because I think that tends to drive down wages in general. It raises it for those at the bottom, but then businesses are paying so much for those people at the bottom that they can't afford to pay higher wages to much higher wages to really skilled people. But I mean, the lower the rate of corporation tax, it's been proved that the greater the receipts. I think France has got a corporation tax rate of something like 33%, and it brings in hardly anything, whereas our rate is at 19% and brings in much more. And I don't know what the figures are for the Republic of Ireland, but I imagine they're doing pretty well out of it.
They have some seriously fucked up like levels of arrangements. Like Facebook were paying, I think, less than 1% at one point.
Oh, were they? Right.
Yeah. The Republic of Ireland is not a good example.
Well, I think the UK is a good example. I think the UK is a good example of 19% bringing in much. Every time it went down, it brought in greater revenue. And isn't that what you want out of a tax? You want to hit the sweet spot where people feel that it's worth paying. It's a reasonable tax and it brings in more revenue. That's what you want. And I think I'm hoping, because the Chancellor has announced this 2 years in advance, that he's not going to raise it. And of course, the reason why there wasn't a big Tory backbench rebellion is because they know it's 2 years down the track and there might be something they can do about it.
So you think it's a bit of a PR play to kind of one up Keir Starmer, who just refused to say he would raise it despite the cause of the
It could be. To me, it seemed a silly decision. If you're going to raise corporation tax, do you do it all in one go? No. I mean, you just don't, do you? I mean, it's a 6% increase. I know what that as a percentage of the percentage is, but that's what it's going up by about 30%.
6%.
6 pence.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, about a third. Yeah, just under a third. That's one hell of a hike, isn't it?
I think even Labour's plans were to do it incrementally, as far as I was aware.
Yes, it was. I heard John McDonnell being interviewed about this last week, and he said, yes, we said we would increase it, but we were going to do it by a couple of percentage points on a gradual thing. I'm not sure whether that's going to happen. I'm not going to worry about it. I'll think about the situation on corporation tax probably in about 18 months' time, because that's when we really need to start thinking about it.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, or sign up to our mailing list. Thanks a lot to our sponsor, ExpressVPN, the #1 most trusted VPN. Get lightning fast connectivity with servers in 160 locations across 94 countries. Keep your browsing privacy safe with ExpressVPN and get a 35% discount on 12 months of ExpressVPN when you follow the link in the description below. Don't forget my book is now out and available to order on Amazon and on bookshop.org. That's Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. And most importantly, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.